First up, we have the Steelers at the Ravens. Over under 46.5, with Baltimore favored by 4.5. Great rivalry here. Now, this should be a really physical matchup with two great defenses that will unfortunately make it difficult for fantasy players this week. Now, you have to start James Conner every week that he plays. He's been putting up double-digit fantasy points consistently regardless of matchup. Start him up as an RB2 this week against Baltimore. Now, the Steelers' wide receivers are really hard to start, but it's fine to start pretty much any of them. Just lower expectations quite a lot. From Deontay, Juju, Claypool, all are low-end flex plays this week, and I don't think we can really start Ebron this week. As for Ben, it's an away game against a great defense in which the Steelers are projected to lose. He's a sit in 12-team and shallower leagues, and you can start him with lower expectations in 14-teamers and bigger. Now for the Ravens, going against the best defense in football, really looks to stop the run, one of the faster defenses. I think Lamar Jackson is still worth a start. You're not going to get 2019 MVP numbers from Lamar this week. Even last year when Lamar played Pittsburgh, he struggled with throwing 3 interceptions. Start him up, but lower expectations. With Hollywood Brown, pretty disappointing so far. He's a low-end flex play, and that's routinely a boomer-bust type of receiver right now. He's in the top 10 in the NFL in air yards, but isn't getting it done for fantasy purposes. Still worth a start because he's a walking 80-yard TD, and if there is one weakness of the Steelers, it's giving up big plays. Recipe for success for Hollywood Brown. Now this is the recipe for success for Hollywood. Start Mark Andrews, sit Gus, unless you're in a 14-team league. Just 2 touchdown dependent against the best rush defense in football. Only reason J.K. Dobbins can be played is because he should be used in the receiving game. Also, this might be the weekend they give Dobbins a real shot. Hasn't had volume all year, but has looked good with touches. Let's keep an eye on him. Next up here, we have the Patriots at the Bills. Over under 41, with Buffalo favored by 4 points. Now, weather's going to be a huge factor this weekend for football. This is one of 3, or I believe actually maybe even 4 matchups that may be affected by over 20-mile-an-hour winds, which makes it pretty difficult for both teams' passing games. This is without a doubt a reason why the over-under for this is only at 41 points. For the Patriots, I imagine this is a make-or-break game for Cam. I don't think the Pats will hold back from using him in the rushing game, especially with this wind forecast, so we are labeling Cam as a start this week solely based on his rushing floor. You can't start any Pats wide receivers or tight ends. Damian Harris, on the other hand, is a low-end flex play, and that's about it. The Pats are slowly becoming a wasteland for fantasy before our very eyes, people. As for the Bills, you still have to start Josh Allen, even though he hasn't looked great as of late. He's honestly a great sell candidate in trades. He's already struggling, and his end-of-season schedule is pretty rough. Replacement value for QBs is almost there, something you should be considering in your leagues with trade deadlines approaching. You have to start Diggs, even with these wins, because he is just so good. No tight ends on Buffalo worth starting, though. As for Singletary and Moss, not even sure what you're supposed to do with these guys. I'm sure one of them will rush for a touchdown and be a fine play for that week because of that touchdown, but Singletary hasn't gone over 40 yards in 3 weeks, and Moss isn't exactly getting a lot of volume either. But he always gets the more valuable touches. Moss is a very low-end flex play. Singletary is a sit. Keep in mind if the weather forecast changes for this matchup, so too does the outlook fantasy-wise, so keep an eye on that report. Titans at Bengals, over under 51, with Tennessee favored by 6.5. The Titans are rolling, and the Bengals are one of the best matchups for your fantasy players at every position. Tannehill, Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, start them all up. As for the Bengals, Joe Burrow really is something special. He's passed for over 300 yards in 5 of his last 6 games without mixing in a game in which the Bengals will be playing in from behind. All of the Bengals wide receiver options are worth starting consideration, with T. Higgins having the highest ceiling. Additionally, start Gio and sit all Bengals tight ends. It should be a great game for fantasy purposes. Next up, Raiders at the Browns, over under 49.5. Cleveland favored by 2.5. This is another game that may be affected by strong winds. Derek Carr, Henry Ruggs, Nelson Aguilar, Darren Waller, all great starts if wind doesn't play a major factor in this matchup. The Browns give up a ton of points in the receiving game, so it would really suck if wind ended up making this a lower scoring game. If it does, though, then this will be a battle between Josh Jacobs and Kareem Hunt, both who should be top 10 plays this week. Josh Jacobs would actually get an upgrade if 20 to 25 mile an hour winds were present during this matchup. As for the Browns, you can start Baker only if there's no wind affecting this game. Baker has looked great when he's faced the Bengals, one of the worst defenses in football. Other than that, the Browns have been winning in spite of his play. The Raiders are a good matchup, so you can start him and his receiving options in Rashard Higgins and Harrison Bryant only if weather permits. Kareem Hunt is a top 5 play every week until Chubb comes back. Next up, Colts at Lions. Over under 50. Indiana favored by 3. All right, the Colts. Is Rivers ever a start? Nah, sit him down. Trey Burton is in a tough matchup, so he may be a sit as well this week, although he should be considered in 14-team leagues. Burton has a good fantasy outlook going forward. Just this matchup isn't a great one as the Lions give up the second least fantasy points to the tight end position. No Colts wide receiver is startable, but you know who is a must start is Jonathan effin' Taylor. Sooner or later, this guy is going to produce in a big way. Till then, he's a must start every week, basically guarantees you 11 to 12 fantasy points a week with major upside. As for the Lions, Stafford has been struggling, whether he has had Galladay or not. Marvin Jones is basically droppable, and AP and Kerryon aren't worth starting either. AP averaging 2.6 yards per carry over the last few contests, and Kerryon isn't efficient enough with the volume he's getting. The Colts give up the least amount of fantasy points to opposing QBs, so he's a sit too. Your only starts on the Lions are Kenny G, Hawkinson, and DeAndre Swift, who should be getting more work as he has looked like the best running back on the team for 2 or 3 straight weeks now. Please do the right thing, Matt Patricia. Give the ball to your best damn running back. Moving on to the Vikings and the Packers. Over under 50. Green Bay here is favored by 6 points. But for the Vikings, Dalvin should be returning, which is only good news for Minnesota. I don't think you can start Kirk Cousins with confidence, even though the Vikings will be playing from behind. The Packers, of course, having been playing good defense a majority of the season, and the Packers can essentially choose which Vikings wide receiver they want to shut out during the game. Jair Alexander has held Calvin Ridley, Mike Evans, and Will Fuller to 0 catches in each of his 3 matchups with those wide receivers. He's having a Pro Bowl type year, and this doesn't bode well for one of Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen. Both wide receivers are still starts, and they're just too valuable in fantasy, but lower expectations for them. Irv Smith Jr. has had 4 receptions over 50 yards in back-to-back games. He was a deep sleeper this channel was hyping going into the season. Perhaps this is the time Minnesota lets him loose. He's start-worthy in 14-plus team leagues. For the Packers, always start your boys Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. You can also start Robert Tonyan. As for running back situation, Aaron Jones has been ruled out again with a calf strain. It looks like the Packers, along with a few other teams, are taking the precautionary route with their running back injuries and waiting till their bye weeks to get their starting running backs back into the mix. This means you can start Jamal Williams as a long-end running back 1, high-end RB2, as A.J. Dillon just wasn't used at all last week. Next up, Jets and Chiefs. Over-under 49.5 with Kansas City favored by 20.5. Ha! This is going to be a blowout. A ridiculous 20.5 point favorite. The Chiefs should put points up aplenty. Start the usual suspects. However, you got to sit guys like McCole Hardman and Denard Robinson, not consistent or productive enough to merit starts. Since the Chiefs will be up big in this matchup, there will be plenty to be had by both running backs CEH and Le'Veon Bell. Always bet on players against their former teams. Revenge games are a real thing. As for the Jets, sit them all. Once again, I don't care that LaMichael Perine scored last week. He's still a sit, really only a desperation play in really deep leagues. Have fun watching Kansas City mop the floor. Next up, Rams at Dolphins. Over under 45.5 with the Rams favored by 3.5. Goff his 2-star receivers in Woods and Kupp are starts just about every week. Now we're sitting all Rams tight ends as the Dolphins have not allowed a touchdown all year. As for the running backs, Akers is barely even playing and Malcolm Brown isn't really getting a whole heck of a lot of volume either. He's mostly just limiting the upside of the only startable running back this backfield has in Darrell Henderson. Now for the Dolphins, this is a pretty exciting week. Tua gets to make his first career NFL start, and it's going to be a tough one. This Rams defense is no joke, headlined by 2 of the best defensive players in football, Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, of course. It's a really tough matchup to start off your NFL career. Gesicki should be a good start here, and going forward, his rookie QBs tend to lean more heavily on their tight ends and slot wide receivers. Additionally, Fitzmagic has thrown far less often to tight ends over his career, so the switch to Tua is nothing but positive for Mike Gesicki. For the running backs, keep rolling out Myles Gaskin. who's only scored under double-digit fantasy points twice this season. Preston Williams hasn't shown any sort of consistency to warrant a spot start, and Devontae Parker is not only battling a groin injury, but he's also going to receive shadow coverage from arguably the best cornerback in football, Jalen Ramsey. Chargers at Broncos, over under 44.5. The line here, we have the Chargers favored by 3.5. Now, Justin Herbert has been playing well for this offense, with Keenan Allen being a major beneficiary of this. Both are good starts, even in a tough matchup. Now, the Broncos defense may not be what we have been accustomed to seeing these past years, but they have been very stout in 2020, doing very well against opposing running backs and not giving up a lot in the air either. Now, the Broncos defense is the only reason this Denver team is even able to compete. As for the running back situation, I think both Josh Kelly and Justin Jackson are sits for this week. This is a good run defense that hasn't allowed many running backs to score in 2020. As for Hunter Henry, he's received 7 or more targets in all but one game this season. His time is coming. I think this is a good week to start him. His time will come in this offense. Just stay patient. Injuries and inefficiencies on the offensive end has made this Broncos offense lethargic at best. You can still start Judy, Fenton, Gordon, and if Lindsey does work past his concussion and is able to play, you can start him as a low-end flex in what should be a close game. Tim Patrick just strained his hammy last week and has been limited in practice all week. It's too risky to start Patrick this week. He should have better weeks going forward, however. Coming up next, we have the Saints and Bears. Over under 42.5 with New Orleans favored by 5.5. This matchup is going to be an ugly one here. We have two defenses with some pretty rough looking offenses. New Orleans is going to be missing their star wide receiver in Michael Thomas. What else is new? Although Allen Robinson has just been cleared to play. Drew Brees has been pretty much unplayable without Michael Thomas, and that holds even more so against the tough Bears defense, with Kamara being the only Saint that you can trust to start this weekend. Back on the other side of the ball, the Bears offense hasn't looked great for a few weeks now, and with Allen Robinson just coming back from a concussion, probably won't be much to change that. But he is a startable player, being their best offensive player on that roster. David Montgomery and Jimmy Graham are pretty touchdown dependent for their position, but they get enough volume to merit starts in what should be a low-scoring affair. Niners at Seahawks. Over under 54 with Seattle favored by 3. For the Niners, Jimmy G has a good matchup against the Seahawks team that just loves to play in shootouts this year. Ayuk and Kendrick Bourne are both flex plays this week in what should be a high-scoring game. As for the Niners running backs, JaMychal Hasty seems like he's going to be carrying the load in Week 8. Tevin Coleman is still trying to return from the short-term IR. Raheem Mostert can't stay healthy. Jeff Wilson Jr. suffered a high ankle sprain in Week 7. And Jerick McKinnon is battling, quote, tired legs, end quote, which explains why his workload has been diminishing in recent weeks. Hasty is the guy to start this week. McKinnon is very risky low-end flex play only because of the nature of this matchup. For all you George Kittle owners out there, sit back and enjoy the show. Now for the Seahawks. Now, who is even playing for the Seahawks at running back? It seems like all of their running backs have some type of injury, although it does appear that DJ Dallas is the only truly healthy running back in this backfield, especially since Carlos Hyde seems doubtful, even though he is a game-time decision. DJ Dallas is a good pivot for this matchup against the Niners. For the Seahawks, start the other studs, forget about their tight ends. Coming up next, Cowboys and Eagles, over under 43 with Philadelphia favored by 10.5. Sorry, Dallas, your team just isn't good this year. Although, in all seriousness, losing Dak was devastating, and losing all those premier starting O-linemen didn't help either. Darius Slay is going to be covering Amari, and to be honest, the only player startable for this Cowboys offense is Zeke. As for the Eagles, this is a great matchup for fantasy. Wentz has been heating up. He is missing plenty of his weapons, but he still does have Travis Fulgham, and he gets back first-round rookie Jalen Reagor. This is also a great starting situation for both Boston Scott and Richard Rodgers. Closing up this Week 8 start sit, we have Bucks at Giants, over under 45, with the line Tampa Bay favored by 13 points. But this should be an exciting game, prime time, and we get to watch Brady and Gronk alongside AB. Antonio Brown is back. Let's see if he still has it, though. Pretty sure he does. Mike Evans, Scotty Miller, and AB are all good starts, with Godwin out in a good matchup against a subpar Giants defense. As for the Bucs running backs, Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, they should receive plenty of work in a game in which the Bucs should be ahead most of this game. For the Giants, obviously this matchup isn't great. You could probably sit everyone except for Wayne Gallman, Sterling Shepard, and Darius Slayton, who are all flex plays. Evan Ingram has been nothing short of a disappointment. Don't even get me started. At this point, it's probably best to just sit him. That'll do it for this week's Start or Sit. We hope we were able to provide you with some league-winning advice on all things fantasy. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter. Stay well, fantasy friends.